Whenever you get into quarterly models or monthly models, the added wrinkle that inevitably comes up in a lot of businesses is seasonality.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. I feel like we haven't done one of these in a while, where we talk about what's new at CFI. My name is Mian. You're familiar with me, and of course, you're familiar with one of our favorite instructors, Duncan McKeen. Today, we're going to be talking about our latest course on forecasting techniques. And forecasting, it's not something that I've done a lot of in my career. And when I say not a lot of, I mean none of. But when I think about it, it seems like a simple yet hard kind of thing where it's like, it's not an art, not a science, whatever is in between. And this is going to be an integral part of developing your financial modeling skills. But better than me talk about it, Duncan, maybe you could give us a little bit of insight scoop about what this course is all about, what got you most excited about the course as you were authoring it, and what you hope that learners will take away from this without giving away too much.
Mhm. Sure thing. Um, yeah, I guess the first thing that was exciting about developing the course was that forecasting is one of these things that tons and tons of people need to do, but what we found is that there's very little guidance on how to do it. And so we sort of broke the course into two parts. We look at some qualitative methods for forecasting, like pest analysis or Porter's five forces. And we also looked at some quantitative methods. And in that section of the course on quantitative methods, we're looking at simple linear regression, multiple linear regression, and we're also looking at some of the forecasting functions which are included in Excel. There's a lot of them, but we sort of zeroed it down to two, which are particularly useful in this course. And we showed the learners how to use those and just how effective they can be. They can save you absolutely tons of time if you know how to use them.
And when we look at the concept of forecasting, depends, I guess, on what type of business you're in, what type of company you work for. But there's ones that typically um, engage in monthly, quarterly, annual forecasting. And when it comes to financial modeling, how does our course take that into consideration?
That was a great question. Um, Probably as everyone would probably know, the most simple types of models are annual models, and they're actually probably the most common types of models as well. And the forecasting within annual models can be relatively simple. It can be as simple as looking at the historic growth, picking up a trend from that historic growth, and then forecasting that into the future. Really, really simple. Probably a lot of people that are listening to the podcast already do this. Whenever you get into quarterly models or monthly models, the added wrinkle that inevitably comes up in a lot of businesses is seasonality. So when you have seasonality, it can make the forecasting really, really tricky because you're trying to really do two things when you forecast into the future in those models. You need to make sure that seasonal pattern is still in the forecasts, but you're also making sure that you're getting the correct growth. And that can be, it may sound simple the way that we've explained it, but it can be really, really tricky. And that is a one area where these forecast functions in Excel can be just so effective. If you go through the course, you'll be amazed at how well they forecast the seasonality, and they're able to also pick up the growth from one year to the next. And like I said, it works so well on quarterly models and monthly models. So particularly with people who are working in FP&A, those those forecast functions can be just huge, huge time savers for sure.
And with forecasting, from a financial modeling perspective, is there a lot of learning that we do about flexibility and building flexibility into the forecast model? Because as we know, generally with businesses, every year and every kind of turn of the economy leads to a lot of change in the business, or some are more stable than others. But with the modeling that we do in forecasting, is it also going to teach learners about um, how to account for change and how to make that model flexible so that it can adapt to that change?
Mhm. That's a great question. Yeah, flexibility is so important. It's something that we really preach actually in all of our modeling courses. Um, You're absolutely right in that, things are constantly changing. And so with all of our models, we make it very, very easy to locate the inputs so that anyone who's running the model can quickly get in there and make updates. And anyone that works in FP&A would know um, firsthand just how frequently things get updated at a minimum of once a month if you're working in that particular profession. And I guess the other thing that is probably worth saying here in terms of our discussion on these forecast functions, and one of the things that we talk about in the course is the importance of always looking at what those functions are doing and making sure that it makes sense. Because we do go over at least one example in the course where those forecast functions actually didn't do a great job at the forecast. And so we overrode that with a manual forecast. And that's critical. That you're not blindly just taking the forecast that's provided by these functions or these forecasting techniques. You can use that as a starting point, but you always want to step back and look at it and decide for yourself, does this make sense given what I know and what I see in the company's history, and also what I know about the company and where it's heading. Because ultimately, it's going to be you, if you're the model builder, you're the one who's going to get asked about the forecast and you're going to need to defend it. And you do not want to be in a position where it's just like, well, this Excel function just told me that was the forecast. Like, that's not going to be a good answer in front of a bunch of stakeholders, right? So you want to comb over it, make sure you're comfortable with it, and that it's defensible.
And so this sounds like a great way to kind of, so now I guess what I would say is over the past, I don't know, like year or so, there have been a lot of, productivity software updates. So for example, I always reach for this, but like Chat GPT, there's other, types of AI out there, but it sounds like with the forecasting functions in Excel, it kind of re-emphasizes the importance of the human behind everything. And although we're getting assistance in building parts of our model, it makes it that much more important for you to be very actively engaged, combing over and being very, very detail oriented in the actual work that's being produced. It's just like we're doing, perhaps like before these types of functions, we would be doing more of the building um, at the ground level. But the actual amount of like thinking that we do and the judgment that we need to put on our models hasn't changed. It's just shifted a little bit in what we're actually doing keystrokes wise.
I think that's a fair comment, Mian. And it's sort of, really like the way that you worded that. Like the amount of thinking doesn't change. It's just that these functions can give you a great first draft of a forecast. You may look at it and be totally comfortable with it, and maybe you'll copy and paste it as values, so it's locked in. But you always want to look at it and make sure that you're comfortable with it. Definitely.
Yeah, it's really interesting because from my time when I was working in finance, it was, I was doing the thinking as I was doing the retrieving of the raw data, formatting things, and building every function as I went. Um, but now, even though I'm kind of trying to produce the same work, my process has changed. I might not necessarily be manually going to different applications, opening different software to get my data, and then manually going through and building every single part of the model step by step. Um, I might not be doing that part, but I'm still applying my judgment throughout, just in a very different way. But it is, I think, something that requires practice to get used to that new workflow. So I think that this is going to be a great course for our learners to kind of get adjusted to the changes in workflow that are happening.
I think so. Yeah. And super excited to put it together and to share it with everybody. I think it'll be a wonderful course and, spans across people working in a number of different positions within finance. Like I said, it's literally anyone who's building a financial model. That model is probably forward looking. And so they'll definitely need to have some forecasting skills in there.
And if there's one outcome that you hope learners take away from the course, what would it be?
Mm, I think the one thing that I would like for learners to get from the course is to be exposed to a number of different forecasting techniques. And when we mentioned some of them earlier, it could be simple linear regression, multiple linear regression, or these forecasting functions, or some of the qualitative methods that we cover in the course. And ideally, we want the learners to come away understanding all those techniques and then being able to apply them when appropriate. You're never going to use all of them
All of them
at the
at
same
once.
time. No, it'd be overwhelming, but you want to just be able to this would be a perfect application here for this forecast function because there's seasonality in this business. So I'm going to use that. And I'd love for them to be able to come away with all of those techniques and then be able to apply them in the appropriate circumstance.
And there you have it. I hope that we've piqued your interest in forecasting techniques. And if you've never built a forecast, this is a great place to start. So until next time, see you all later.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. FinPod is brought to you by Corporate Finance Institute, the #1 rated online provider of finance and banking training, certifications, and productivity tools.